Welcome to the Emoji cross-stitch tutorial, presented by Greenhouse Library. So first you want to go to the website stitchfiddle.com and to set up our pattern. This is a free site and it's really easy to use. So once you get to the site, you're going to see this page. You want to click on cross-stitch, and then for the floss, just click the first option, DMC. And what you're going to do is you're going to start with an empty chart. This is going to be our own design. Grid size, you're going to do 55 by 55. Those are the pre-cut Ida cloth you have. And then you hit go. Alright, so we have our workspace, and you're just going to want to zoom out so you can see the entirety of it. Just until we can see everything. And I'm just picking the yellow color arbitrarily. Okay, I'm going to just start mapping out my emoji. So I'm going to do it sort of in the center, and I'm going to start with a big square. And the reason we want to do this and map out our stitch and design before we start, so we can make sure that we're happy with the design, that it's going to fit on our area, and that everything's going to be symmetrical and that we won't mess up if we just start stitching randomly. So just making sure that everything is even. And so I see here that we have more space at the bottom, so I'm going to add a little bit more stitches to make that more even. Okay, and now I think I'm going to start on the sides to make them a little bit more round, so that way we're going to start doing more diagonal stitches, and these I'm going to do more symmetrical. So I'm trying to make sure that my bottom, my top, and my right and left sides are even. I'm going to mimic each side, and count your stitches, count your squares. Are they even? And you'll see as we make this chart and design, it's really going to help later on when we're stitching on our actual project. We can follow along the stitches, and it really helps minimize mistakes and unevenness. I think I'm going to try a little bit more. I'm going to just finish that off. And feel free to play with it. The way it looks on here is the way it's going to look on your project. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So next, I'm going to pick another color. I just picked the purple here, and I'm going to make the eyes. And again, you want to count the stitches and make sure everything is even. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the smile. I'm making a simple happy emoji. That's my outline, and now I'm going to fill it out to the shape that I want. Okay. I like the way that looks. But now I think he's missing something. I'm going to give him some eyebrows. And just make sure, again, you count your stitches, that it's even. I think I have an extra one. There we go. And then remove those two. That's pretty good. Okay, so now we're going to be plotting the center stitch. So the reason we're going to do this is to make sure that when we are doing our project, it's going to be as even as possible. So I counted from the top evenly to the center, and then I'm going to just do a line down the middle, all the way to the center of the emoji face. So I know that that whole line is actually my center stitch. And then I'm going to do the same from the horizontal way. And I think this one turned out that there were 2 middle stitches, so I just plot those. So I just do the 2 stitches. And there you're gonna have your center stitch. So the point that they intersect right in the center here, that's gonna be our very, very center stitches. And I'm gonna actually plot that in a different color. So if we go here, now we have our Ida cloth ready and our hoop, and I'm going to try to find the centermost square on the cloth here. And first I'm going to start by just kind of eyeballing it. So with eyeballing, I'm just going to kind of stick a needle in there just to see. It looks a little high, so I'm going to go down a few stitches. So I'm taking that as my center right there. And then I'm going to actually count the squares on either side of the needle. Okay, so that was a little off, so I'm going to move it 1 over, so that's more even. And I'm going to do the same to the top and the bottom. Just going to count to make sure that the number of squares is approximately as close as possible to the same. Okay, and then I'm just going to move that down 1 because the top had less. So that's just 1 square is going to be the 1 stitch, which we went over in our introduction video. Okay, so that's the center, and just like how we made a mark on the thing, I'm actually going to just make a mark of the 2 center stitches. I'm going to mark that so I don't forget. So now that that's marked, we can start stitching. So on my design here, I want to just indicate with a different color the center stitches so that it's easy to follow when I'm actually stitching. I put the center stitch on the design, and I'm going to go ahead and sew the center stitch using the X cross stitch method that I showed you in our introduction video. Please go check that out if you haven't watched it yet. So you stitch from the bottom up, and 1 square equals 1 X stitch, and you make sure you go cross over. And with that, you have your first X stitch on our center stitch in the project. I'm going to sew the second X stitch, going from the opposite hole in the second stitch, and then into the hole of the one above it in diagonal. And then just complete the second stitch. So now, after having the center stitch to sort of help us follow along, we're going to continue to cross stitch. So use this design to help you. I pick a different color, and I'm actually going to count the stitches for each square that I'm going to stitch. So right now I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches from the center stitch. So that's the first 7 that I'm going to show you, and you're going to be skipping them out. But so here we have our 2 center stitch that was in the red, and then I'm going to stitch 7 stitches down, just like I mapped out with the pink color on the design. And make sure you're counting as you stitch so that you don't overstitch or understitch and mess up your design. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have one more. And then I'm going to finish the 7th stitch right here. So including the 2 stitches, I have the 2 plus 7. So now I'm going to skip these 3 stitches that are going to be the mouth in a different color. I don't want to stitch those right now, and I'm going to go down and continue stitching the center line of the bottom half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches as well. So I'm going to count the 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3 that I'm skipping, and then I'm going to start on the 4th stitch from the line and finish down with 7 stitches. So make sure you're counting your squares correctly. 1 square is 1 stitch. And then in the design, a square of color is 1 square or 1 stitch on your design. Okay, so here we have the 3 empty stitches and then the 7 stitches down. So now I'm going to continue. I'm going to actually go across the bottom and stitch so I can start outlining my smiley face. So you count the appropriate number of stitches and then you continue stitching on your project. So I'm gonna stitch all the way up like that so I can kind of get the right design, and then I'm also gonna come back. So what I'm doing here is, as you can see, is I'm mapping out what stitches I'm going to be doing on the project on this design first. That way I can count it, and then I make sure I'm not messing up. And so here, this is the stitch that I did. So I went from that last stitch of the center stitch, I went to the right, up, and then back down, and I have that here. So I can start up, I can go up that way, which is what I'm going to plan right here. I'm going to go up, or I'm going to go, I can go up or I can go to the side, but I'm decided to go sort of use the shape of the mouth to my advantage and go up and down, and that's the kind of shape or the kind of direction I'm going to be going. You choose what direction you want. It doesn't matter how you do it, but you want to kind of figure out the most efficient way to do it. So if you're stitching the stitch here, you don't want to just go to a stitch on the other side of your project. Try to do everything as close as possible in the same row, back up, down the other same row, and that's going to save you a lot of thread, and it's going to save you a lot of time, and it's going to be way cleaner in the back. So here I'm continuing to sort of plan out the order in which I'm going to be stitching, counting, and continuing. I am planning exactly how I'm going to be doing it in the future too, which direction is going to be best. I think I'm going to go up and down and then maybe go into the face and try to finish actually the first quarter of this smiley face. So now I'm going to just fill that all in so I know that this is the parts that I'm going to be working on. And you can take your time with this, save your design, take your time. You don't have to do this all in one day. Probably very hard to do this all in one day. Just make sure you're stitching slowly and counting every stitch. So this is what the quarter of my design looks like. And I can decide to go up and finish the top half first or go to the left. And I think I'm going to go to the top half first. But this is up to you. You can just use your design and count your stitches. And that's the empty space for the mouth. So I'm gonna go up and I'm gonna actually just do all the stitches for the first side of the face. Don't forget that you have to leave open the eyebrows stitches and the eye stitches. So when you're doing your stitch, count those as empty stitches. Do not stitch those squares. So this is what it looks like after doing the top half of my emoji. See how I left the empty spaces open for the eye and for the eyebrow. And then I'm just going to complete the other side. Do the same thing. It's all the same. Just stitch and count, stitch and count. Use every square and with a new color and just count how many stitches am I stitching. Make sure you're double checking. It's okay to take your time on this. And see, now I finished with my yellow base and I have my details to finish. So this is obviously going to be the easiest part because you're going to have done all the hard counting and symmetry, and now all you need to do is just fill in his eyebrows, eyes, and mouth in the color that you choose. I'm doing it in black for the classic emoji color. And I'm doing a quick stitch that you start off with half the stitch down one row and then you finish the stitch down at the second row. That's supposed to be faster, and you can see that method in our introduction video. And then I'm going to, just to save string and thread, I'm going to finish off the string every time because it's just a little too far. I'll finish that off, cut it, make a new knot, and start again. And then we'll do the eye or the other eyebrow. I'm gonna do the eye. and you get the idea. I'm going to finish off the rest of my emojis details and see you back when we're done. Okay, and here's the final product. It's going to be really satisfying finishing this off on your own. You can always choose your design yourself, or you can follow the one that I mapped out for you. Regardless, you should be really proud of yourself. Look at those little X's. You're going to do all of that yourself, and it's going to be so great to hang on your wall. You can take it out and put it in a frame, whatever you want. Give it as a gift. Thanks for joining us, and that's it.